What if I told you that the most devastating punishments in human history were not the ones that broke bones, burned flesh, or spilled blood? The real horror, the kind that destroyed civilizations from within, was written in ink, carved in stone, and locked away in secret archives. Heard of crucifixion? You know about the rack. You've seen documentaries about medieval torture chambers. History has deliberately hidden something far darker, the punishments that were invisible, the ones that killed slowly, the ones that left no marks, the ones that turned entire families against each other and drove societies to the brink of collapse. Today, descending into a corner of history that documentaries avoid, we're going to uncover punishments so psychologically devastating, so perfectly designed to destroy the human spirit, that they make the ancient torture chamber look like a child's playground. Weren't aberrations, they were systems, they were deliberate, and they were terrifyingly effective. In ancient Rome was a punishment so terrifying that most citizens would have chosen death over it. It was called damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. It wasn't about what they did to your body. It was about what they did to your existence. Imagine this. You commit a crime against Rome. Emperor doesn't execute you. That would be mercy. Instead, he decides that you must be erased. Every statue of you is destroyed, painting burned. Every inscription bearing your name is chiseled away. Your family is renamed. Children are forbidden from inheriting your property. Your grandchildren grow up knowing a name they can never speak. Your greatest terror isn't death. It's that no one will remember you ever lived. But here's what makes this truly diabolical. It wasn't just about you. It was about breaking your will to resist while you were still alive. Citizens who were targeted for damnatio memoria weren't immediately executed. They were forced to watch, day by day, their legacy was systematically destroyed. They saw their children rejected by society. They saw their life's work erased. The punishment continued after death, their memory, their very existence removed from history. The psychological impact was catastrophic. Some of the condemned went mad. Some took their own lives before the erasure was complete, trying to claim some final shred of agency. Most endured in silent agony, worse than pain, worse than mutilation. They endured the knowledge that everything they were would be forgotten. The Romans didn't invent psychological punishment. In ancient China during the Zhou dynasty, existed a law called Zhou clan extermination, a punishment so brutal that it makes damnatio memoriae look almost gentle by comparison. You committed a crime serious enough, treason, regicide, or even just insulting the wrong noble, the punishment didn't stop at you. It extended to your parents, your siblings, your entire extended family, your children, your grandchildren. Sometimes 9 generations of your bloodline were systematically executed. The state didn't just want to punish you, wanted to erase the possibility that your bloodline could ever seek revenge. Imagine knowing that your child's death, your grandchild's death, and deaths stretching into a future you'd never see. Imagine knowing that all of this was punishment for something the guilt, the horror, the impossible moral weight of knowing that innocent people would die because of your actions. Tormentors knew this. They counted on it. They designed the punishment not just for your body, but for your conscience. Made these punishments truly evil wasn't the physical pain, it was the precision. Architects of these systems understood something about human psychology that modern experts are only now beginning to confirm. Understood that the fear of erasure, of being forgotten, of bringing suffering to your loved ones, these fears are deeper and more devastating: pain. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church controlled what was remembered. They controlled the written word. The most devastating punishment wasn't excommunication, though that was terrible enough. True horror was something called suppressio nominis, the suppression of a name from the ecclesiastical record. The church decided you were damned enough, they wouldn't just remove you from the rolls of the living, would systematically erase you from every religious record, not just current records. Medieval monks would go back and scratch your name from baptism records, marriage records, ordination records. They would create literal blanks in the historical record. The message was clear. You never truly existed. You never mattered. Not only would you be forgotten, the evidence that you ever lived would be physically removed. Here's the truly insidious part. The church kept these erasures secret. You might not even know that your name had been removed. Family might not know. You'd go about your life thinking you were still part of Christendom, only to discover after death that you'd been erased from the very institution that defined your moral existence. Priests would refuse to give you last rites because they had no record of you. You couldn't be buried in consecrated ground because, officially, never been baptized. Your funeral would be in darkness without ceremony, a hole in the ground, and the knowledge that the church had decided you were less than human. But we haven't even reached the most devastating category of punishment yet, because the systems we've discussed so far, Dematio Memoriae, Zoo Clan Extermination, Suppressio Nominis, these were all punishments for something you'd already done. What if the most evil punishments weren't reactive at all? What if they were preventative? The Ottoman Empire during the 15th through 19th centuries, there existed an institution called the Devshirme system. Represents one of the most sophisticated psychological punishments ever created, because it punished people for the crime of being born into the wrong family. The Devshirme was a systematic process of taking Christian children from the Balkans, boys as young as 8 or 10, and forcing them to service to the Ottoman state. But calling it forced service doesn't capture the horror of what it really was. Children were stripped of their names, stripped of their religion, stripped of their language, stripped of any connection to their former identity. They were then trained to be elite soldiers, the janissaries, or government officials, were taught to be fierce, obedient, and most importantly, loyal only to the state. They were raised to believe that their former Christian families were infidels, that their native villages were places of darkness and sin. Their only true home was the Ottoman Empire. The genius of this punishment was that it operated on multiple timelines. For the child, it was immediate psychological torture. For the parents, it was eternal grief. Their child was alive, but dead to them. Might see their son or grandson years later, now a high-ranking Ottoman official, and he wouldn't recognize them. He might even order their execution. The punishment had transformed their own child into the instrument of their destruction. For generations, families in the Balkans lived with this terror. Every few years, Ottoman officials would arrive to collect boys. Parents would hide their children in caves and forests. Some families even self-mutilated their sons to make them unacceptable to the recruiters. Psychological devastation of knowing that the state could come and steal your child at any moment, and that this act was legal, systematic, without recourse. This created a civilization of people living under a psychological death sentence. Now, critical insight that historians and most documentaries miss is this. All of these punishments, erasure from memory, generational execution, religious condemnation, forced removal, and identity destruction, they all share one crucial characteristic: exploited something that physical torture does not. They exploited the human need for continuity. Humans are the only species that understands we will die, and how we cope with that existential terror is through legacy, through believing that something of us will continue. Our children carry our genes, our name carries our reputation, our deeds are recorded in history. If you take all of that away, you don't just punish the person, you destroy the fundamental meaning that allows them to accept their mortality. This is where we're going to pause, because the story gets even darker from here. The medieval Inquisition didn't just punish people. They created entire systems of psychological torture designed specifically to destroy the human will. And the systems that came after were even more refined, more calculated, and more devastatingly effective. Human civilization has spent millennia perfecting the art of punishment. But the most evil punishments were never the ones that left scars. They were the ones that erased the possibility of scars ever being healed. What made the Inquisition truly diabolical wasn't just the torture chambers themselves. It was what happened before you ever entered one. It was the documentation, the obsessive, meticulous record-keeping that turned human suffering into bureaucracy. Every interrogation was logged. Every confession was transcribed. Every name was catalogued for eternity. This is the psychological genius and the horror that most people miss. A man could be tortured and released, scars fade, bones heal, but his name, once written in the Inquisition's register, remained forever tainted. Flee to another city, another country even. But the records would follow. They would outlive him. They would define him to everyone he met. Crime might have been imaginary. He might have confessed under unimaginable agony. He might have been completely innocent. It didn't matter. Document existed, and in a world before the printing press could spread information widely. But after writing had become a tool of absolute power, document was destiny. But the Inquisition was just the beginning, because as human civilization evolved, so did our capacity for systematic punishment, and by the 18th and 19th centuries, there emerged something far more insidious than torture chambers. Emerged the penal system itself. The modern prison was arguably humanity's most evil invention because it solved a problem previous societies. What do you do with a person after their punishment is over? The answer that emerged was chilling in its simplicity. You never let them be done being punished. The English philosopher John Bentham designed the panopticon in 1785, a prison structure where guards watch all inmates at all times, but inmates could never know when they were being watched. This wasn't just architecture, it was weaponized psychology. It was the prison as a machine for destroying human autonomy and dignity in real time every single day. Mates had no privacy, not for bathing, not for using the toilet, not for sleeping. They had no privacy for the most intimate, vulnerable moments of human existence, and they knew it. The psychological effect was documented extensively. Prisoners began to internalize the gaze of authority. They became their own jailers. This is what we call the death of the self. Death by execution, death by erasure, a person still breathing, still existing physically, stripped of every element that makes a human being human. The ability to choose, the ability to be alone with your own thoughts without fear, ability to maintain dignity. And here's the truly devastating part. This system actually worked. It reduced violence in prisons, increased compliance, it created order. So the panopticon spread across the world. Prisons based on Bentham's design were built in England, America, continental Europe, and eventually everywhere. The system that was most efficient at destroying the human spirit became the universal model. Even the panopticon was a blunt instrument compared to what came next. Because the 20th century brought something new to human punishment, brought the ideological prison, the system where you're not just locked away from society, you're locked away from reality itself. Soviet Gulag system under Stalin represented a new frontier in punishment. These weren't prisons designed to reform or even to contain, were designed to exhaust, to destroy through labor, to turn human beings into resources that could be consumed, and when they wore out, simply replaced. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a prisoner who survived the Gulag, documented the system in his monumental work, The Gulag Archipelago. Described punishment that wasn't designed to be survived in any meaningful sense. A prisoner might live through it. The person they were, their personality, their hopes, their identity, that was meant to die in the camps. Gulag system reveals something about evil punishments that earlier societies might not have fully understood. Most devastating punishment isn't the one that kills you fastest. It's the one that kills you slowest while making you complicit in your own. Destruction. Prisoners were forced to mine, to build, to work, and that work kept the system running. They became the machinery of their own torture. What made this evil even more refined was the psychological control layer added on top. The Soviet state didn't just imprison dissidents, also imprisoned them in a web of ideology. They were told constantly that they deserved this, that their punishment was justice. The system was working toward a greater good. Many prisoners, broken by years in the camps, actually came to believe it. This is coercive control elevated to a state apparatus. This is punishment designed not just to punish, to make the victim defend their own punishment, to make them convince themselves that what's being done to them is right. But even the Soviet Union, with all its technological sophistication and ideological control, didn't invent the most psychologically devastating punishment system. That honor belongs to something far older and far more insidious. Caste system that developed in ancient India. The Indian caste system was a punishment imposed at birth and lasting until death. Didn't commit a crime to be punished. You were simply born into a caste, a social rank, and that determined everything about your life. What you could eat, who you could marry, what occupation you were allowed to have, even how close you could stand to a person of higher caste. Here's the psychological genius of the caste system that makes it arguably more evil than individual punishments. It was self-perpetuating, built into religion. The text said that if you were born a Dalit, it was because of your karma in a previous life. Deserved this punishment because of something you did before you were even born. You had no escape. Not in this life. Maybe the next one if you accepted your punishment with grace. This is punishment weaponized through spirituality. Evil made invisible because it's justified by the eternal order of the universe itself. Dalit couldn't rebel against their caste because that would be rebelling against cosmic law. The system didn't just control behavior, it controlled consciousness itself. For almost 4,000 years, this system destroyed billions of human lives, through torture chambers or execution, but through the slow, systematic erasure of possibility itself. A child born Dalit knew absolute certainty that there was nothing they could do to improve their station. Their life was predetermined punishment, had to internalize that punishment as deserved. The reason these historical punishments are the most evil isn't because they caused the most immediate suffering. It's because they're the ones that echoed longest, the ones that had no endpoint, the ones that taught people to despise themselves for what they couldn't change. And as we look at these systems, we have to ask ourselves, what punishments exist in our modern world that we don't recognize as punishments? Systems are we building right now that future generations will look back on in horror? Because punishment doesn't need to look medieval anymore. Doesn't need torture chambers or guards. The most sophisticated punishment systems of today are invisible. They exist in algorithms that predict your behavior, in debt systems that ensure generational poverty, surveillance states that watch every digital movement you make, in social media platforms that can amplify shame or erase reputation with a single algorithm change. We live in an era where a single video, a single accusation, a single mistake posted online can follow you forever. Digital footprint is a permanent record, much like the Inquisition's ledgers, but infinitely more accessible, infinitely more permanent, infinitely harder to escape. And if you want to understand more about how these invisible punishment systems work and how they're shaping our future, I've put together a deep dive resource that goes into the psychological mechanisms behind these systems, how they control us without us even realizing we're being controlled. You'll find it in the description and pinned in the comments. It will absolutely change the way you see modern society. The pattern is always the same. Punishment evolves. The tools change. The mechanisms become more sophisticated, but the core remains, the destruction of human autonomy, dignity, and hope. Truly evil punishments are the ones we don't recognize as punishment at all, is where the story of human punishment intersects with our present moment, and why understanding history isn't just about understanding the past. It's about recognizing the cages we're building for ourselves right now. Because here's what historians don't want you to understand. The most devastating punishments in human history weren't always the ones that left visible scars. They were the ones that hollowed people out from the inside. They were the ones that made people complicit in their own destruction. They were the ones that became so normalized, so embedded in daily life, that nobody even recognized them as punishment anymore. The concept of psychological isolation. For centuries, solitary confinement was considered the ultimate punishment because it worked. Broke minds faster than any physical torture ever could. Sensory deprivation, complete social disconnection, absence of human touch. These things fundamentally rewire the human brain. Inmates would go mad within weeks, some within days. What happens when we create a society where psychological isolation is the default state? When technology intermediates every human connection, people can be surrounded by millions of others, yet experience profound loneliness. When the punishment isn't imposed by an external authority, voluntarily chosen, the medieval king had to lock people in cells and hire guards to watch them. A modern punishment system can simply design your environment, create your algorithms, and let you lock yourself in. You do it willingly. Pay for the privilege. Psychological studies have shown that our current relationship with technology replicates the exact same brain damage patterns that solitary confinement creates. We're experiencing elevated cortisol levels, the stress hormone. We have decreased dopamine sensitivity. Normal pleasures feel hollow. We develop anxiety disorders, depression, and a profound sense of disconnection. Unlike a prisoner in a cell, we blame ourselves. We think we're the problem. We think we're not disciplined enough, not strong enough, not good enough. This is brilliant punishment design. The prisoner doesn't know they're in a prison. The torture is invisible. The torturer is you. The guards? Well, they're your friends, your family, your peers, all of them locked in their own cells, all of them too distracted to notice the bars. The ancient punishments we studied earlier, the drawing and quartering, the breaking wheel, slow executions, those were crude. They were inefficient. They generated sympathy. They created martyrs. They provoked rebellion. But a punishment that people don't recognize as punishment, that people voluntarily participate in, that people pay for and defend, that's perfection. Deepest horror? The punishment keeps evolving. We're now developing artificial intelligence that can predict behavior before it happens. We're creating systems that can identify dissent before it even forms conscious thought. Building what amounts to a global panopticon that Bentham himself could never have imagined, not made of bricks and guards, but of algorithms and invisible digital walls. The historian Michel Foucault wrote extensively about how modern punishment systems are designed not to destroy the body, but to train the soul, to create what he called docile bodies, people who regulate their own behavior because they've internalized the idea that they're always being watched. People who police themselves. And he was describing the prison system of his time. No idea what we'd become. We've built a civilization that has taken the worst lessons from every tyrant, every despot, every authoritarian regime in history, and we've automated them. We've made them efficient. We've made them invisible. And most terrifyingly, made them consensual. The punishments that will be remembered as the most evil 1,000 years from now won't be the ones in history books. They'll be the ones we're experiencing right now, the ones we're inflicting on ourselves, the ones we don't have the framework to even recognize as punishment. And what makes this genuinely terrifying is that understanding it doesn't free. Knowing you're in a panopticon doesn't make it stop existing. Recognizing the punishment doesn't stop you from participating in it. The punishment is so interwoven with the fabric of modern existence that opting out means losing your career, your social connections, ability to function in society. It means becoming a genuine outcast, which means the system has become self-perpetuating. Can't escape it without losing everything. So you stay, you participate, you internalize the punishment until it becomes your identity, is the true horror of human punishment. Not that it exists, not that it's brutal, but that it's become so sophisticated, so invisible, so integrated into the systems we depend on that we've forgotten to call it punishment at all. Darkest chapters of human history are the ones we're writing right now. And unlike the horrors committed by kings and tyrants, horrors have our fingerprints all over them. We are the architects. We are the executioners. We are the imprisoned. Here's what I want you to understand before we end this. Knowledge is still power. Understanding these patterns, seeing how punishment evolves, how control becomes invisible, how systems replicate across centuries, that understanding is the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy. If you want to go deeper into this, if you want to explore the specific historical and technological mechanisms that created our current moment, I've put together something special that you'll find linked in the description and pinned in the top comment. It's a resource guide that connects the dots from ancient tyrants to modern algorithms, and honestly, might be the most important thing you read this month. The path forward isn't about rejecting technology entirely. It's about understanding what you're connected to, who benefits from your attention, and what you're consenting to every time you pick up your device. It's about being intentional about your disconnection, even if that disconnection is partial and imperfect. You're serious about understanding how to actually break these patterns in your own life, how to build genuine autonomy in a system designed to prevent it. Everything you need is waiting for you in the description and in the channel itself. Go find it. Thank you so much for descending into this darkness with me. I know this wasn't an easy watch. This content is meant to disturb, to make you question, to shake you awake, and I hope it did. If you found this genuinely unsettling and important, subscribe to the Throne of Horrors. Hit that like button so more people see this. Activate the notification bell so you never miss when we upload our next deep dive into history's hidden horrors. Upload new explorations every single week, and each one is designed to show you the pattern